In this video, I want to compare Keychron's new V1 Max and Q1 Max 75% knobbed mechanical keyboards. I own the original V1 and Q1 version 2, so when Keychron released upgraded versions of both in late 2023, I was intrigued and immediately reached for my wallet because they seem to address all of the previous shortcomings of their predecessors, which were already good keyboards. Most notably, they've introduced multi-mode wireless connectivity with fast polling. I also figured a lot of people may be deciding between the two since they're pretty well matched on paper, each offering 75% 81 key layouts, including a rotary knob, QMK and VIA compatibility for customization, PBT double-shot keycaps with individual Mac and Windows legends, a gasket-mounted PCB supported by a polycarbonate plate, considerable internal foam upgrades, clean and simple case designs, and a 4000 mAh battery that supports 3 Bluetooth 5.1 connections at 90 Hz, or importantly, a radio frequency connection polling at 1000 Hz to match the keyboard's wired performance. They also both come with Gateron's new Jupiter switches, are hot swappable, and use the same ARM Cortex-M4 32-bit microcontroller. They also have the same excellent south-facing per-key RGB backlighting and effects that we've come to expect from Keychron. That said, there are some differences that I think you should know about, which may help you make a decision between the $209 USD Q1 Max and the wildly affordable $94 V1 Max. So let's get into it. The all-aluminum CNC'd case of the Q1 Max is definitely an upgrade over the injection-molded ABS plastic of the V1 Max. That said, both are well made without any noticeable external defects, and there's really only minor differences in dimensions, as well as a few more chamfers on the Q1 Max. The aluminum does come at a cost though, with the Q1 Max weighing in more than double that of the V1 Max, which is surprisingly 24% lighter than the standard V1. This gives the Q1 Max a substantial heft that feels nice when shifting it around your desk, but could be problematic if portability is important to you. I've transported both of them around without much issue using Keychron's carrying case, but if I was packing it in a knapsack regularly, I'd probably lean towards the V1 Max. That said, I do wonder if Keychron made the V1 Max a little too light. It's nothing technical, just that weight can sometimes translate into a feeling of value for some people, and I personally prefer the balance struck with the original V1's weight. However, the V1 Max does seem to be crafted with portability in mind, because it has magnetic storage built into the back of the case for 2 radio frequency receivers, one USB-A and one USB-C, in contrast to the Q1, which only comes with a single USB-A receiver and no means of storing it. This was a bit surprising, but given that the V1 Max can only use one of its receivers at a time, it's probably not a big deal. It's just strange that the less expensive model is more future-proofed with the USB-C. A more noteworthy case difference is the natural tilt of the keyboards. Though their cases are very similar, ignoring the keycaps for just another moment, the case of the Q1 Max tilts a little higher than that of the V1 Max, at 5.2 degrees rather than 3.5 degrees. This seems like a little difference, but it's exaggerated by the KSA keycap sculpting, which adds 2 degrees of additional tilt compared to only 1 degree of additional tilt with the V1 Max's OSA keycaps. Overall, this makes the Q1 Max more comfortable in its default position. And that's important because the Q1 Max's aluminum case isn't adjustable, whereas the V1 Max's ABS case has kickstand legs that can increase its tilt to either 7.1 degrees or 9.5 degrees, both of which I find more comfortable than the base level. So unless you're going to affix external aids like these 3D printed feet that I designed for my original Q1, if you're looking for flexibility in your typing angle, the V1 Max has it. However, the higher default tilt of the Q1 Max is still comfortable. As you probably noticed, the pre-built Q1 and V1 Max have considerably different keycaps. Both are double-shot PBT and have nice clean legends, as well as a few extras included to make the front row Mac or Windows specific, though only the V1 Max comes with the escape and enter keys needed to remove the color accents if you wish to. However, the V1 Max comes with Keychron's OEM spherical angled, or OSA, keycaps, which have a more subtle and common sculpting when moving from front to back. They also have rounded edges leading up to the top surface that has a nice concave profile from left to right. These currently only come pre-equipped in this two-tone navy blue colorway with orangey red accent keys to distinguish the Max from the standard V1, which was gray with pinkish red accents. Alternatively, the Q1 Max sports the Keychron spherical angled or KSA keycaps, which have much more aggressive sculpting moving from front to back, as well as top concavity that is truly spherical and exaggerated on the F and J keys. This profile definitely takes some getting used to. The drafting of the taller keys actually adds about 0.5 millimeter of gap between each key compared to the OSA profile, but despite my initial dislike for them, I've actually really come to enjoy typing on the KSA keycaps, but this took about a week of continuous use. That said, I think the V1 Max's OSA profile will be less shocking for most people, though you can always swap out the keycaps on either keyboard if you're looking for something different. I've really come to enjoy the look of these Keychron OEM white and gray keycaps on my Q1 Max. After getting my hands on the Q1 and V1 Max and taking them apart, I realized that there were also some considerable differences in their internal construction. Though both offer considerable internal foam upgrades compared to the rather bare standard Q1 and V1 predecessors, the Q1 Max takes it a little further. Both have polycarbonate plates which sandwich foam and a switch pad to the top side of the PCB, though the Q1 Max uses a softer IXPE foam for the switch pads, while the V1 Max uses a firmer and more plasticky PET sheet. Also, though the V1 Max has been upgraded to a foam gasket-mounted system like the Q1 Max, it's worth noting that the V1 Max gaskets are mounted to the case, sandwiching the plate fins, rather than mounted directly to the plate itself. I'm not sure that this really makes a difference, and neither is particularly flexible, but it's interesting to note. There's also one less gasket on the Q1 Max, making room for the wireless communications antenna, which passes its signal through the plastic decal on the back of the Q1 Max case. Inside the cases, we see that the daughter board is mounted to the Q1 Max's top case, and the V1 Max mounts it to the bottom case. The bottom case itself actually has a few notable distinctions as well, with the V1 Max having a much deeper and more hollow cavity compared to that of the Q1 Max, and only featuring a single thick layer of soft foam compared to the Q1 Max's more elaborate 3-layer system with a latex bottom pad, thinner acoustic foam, and a PET film. In either case, pun intended, at the very bottom we find the same 4000 mAh battery that powers the keyboard's wireless communications. Oh, and it's worth noting that Keychron has embedded rubber force brakes on the Q1 Max, an important feature to prevent unwanted ping and resonance with this metallic case. I found it interesting that the Q1 and V1 Max both spec the same battery as lasting 100 hours when the backlight is set to its lowest brightness, but the Q1 Max only estimates 180 hours without backlight, while the V1 Max estimates 225. So, I tested the battery depletion of both under worst case conditions with a full brightness static backlight and using the radio frequency connections, while monitoring in 1-hour increments for 10 hours. I found that the Q1 Max had 83% of its battery remaining at the end of that 10-hour period, while the V1 Max had only 79%. Now, this test was somewhat anecdotal. There are factors like the amount of typing done during the test period that weren't controlled for, but the results are interesting. It's worth noting though that the 4% difference between the two battery levels was evident almost immediately with the test, as the V1 Max dropped to 96% within the first minute of testing. So perhaps this is a quality control thing with my specific model. Honestly though, given that they're using the same microcontroller, the same backlight, and the same battery, I wouldn't expect to find a considerable difference in battery life with all other things being equal. And this brings me to the sound tests. First, let's listen to the keyboards with each of the Jupiter switches available: linear reds, tactile browns, and heavier 2-stage tactile bananas. Then compare these to the original V1 and Q1 version 2. Overall, I'm able to hear a good amount of stabilizer rattle with either keyboard, despite what looks like a fair amount of factory looping. So you may want to tune the stabilizers regardless of which version that you opt for. That said, to my ears, the Q1 Max sounds considerably better than the V1 Max, so I decided to test two more things. How does the Q1 Max sound if we switch the taller KSA keycaps for the shallower OSA profile? And how would the V1 Max sound if we stole the latex bottom pad and PET film from the Q1 Max case? Here are the results. What do you think? When switching the Q1 Max from the default KSA keycaps to the OSA ones, I think the volume remains more or less the same, but the OSA are slightly higher in pitch. When adding the extra Q1 Max foam layers to the V1 Max, I was able to hear a little dampening and deepening of the tone of the keyboard, but it wasn't as pronounced as I honestly expected. After spending over a month with the V1 Max and the Q1 Max, I've come to appreciate both keyboards. That said, I fully expected to simply be recommending the V1 Max over the Q1 Max because of its price point, tilt adjustment, and generally well-matched feature set. However, I hear much more of a difference between the Q1 Max and the V1 Max than I expected when they're side by side, and I've surprisingly come to enjoy the typing experience of the KSA keycaps on the Q1 Max. So the decision wasn't as clean-cut as I thought. Ultimately, both are pretty well constructed keyboards with nice keycaps and a good selection of respectable Gateron Jupiter switches available, though you could opt for a bare bones kit and save $20. The Max lineup is also available in limited colors for now, but I expect to see this offering grow over time, and I'd really like to see the semi-transparent frosted black case come back to the V1 Max because I really like that hint of transparency. It's also worth noting that I haven't talked about the Q1 Pro, for two reasons. I've never tried it, and the V1 doesn't have a Pro lineup to contrast it with. That said, it seems like the Max has been upgraded to include a radio frequency connection compared to just Bluetooth, as well as the inclusion of a switch pad and 3 levels of case foam compared to a single foam sheet in the Pro. Honestly, the ultra-fast 100Hz radio frequency polling of the Max is probably the only reason I would upgrade. Overall though, I think the Q1 Max is a very appealing keyboard at $209. This isn't a small investment, but it sounds good right out of the box, has a well-crafted aluminum case, and I think you could take it further with tuning and modifications if that's your thing. If I had to choose, having tried both of them, I would opt for the Q1 Max with the 2-stage tactile banana switches. Alternatively, for its price, the V1 Max is a really terrific value for someone who wants an all-around entry-level mechanical keyboard or is looking for something with more portability. Really, the value champ just got an upgrade without having an associated cost increase. But what do you think? Which switch and keyboard combination sounded best to you? Let me know using the comments below, And as always, if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.